All right, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, thank you for participating in the poll. We had some good insights basis your participation. And with that, as I mentioned, we are heading into a panel discussion where technology would be focused upon with a purpose. What's the role of cloud in the business transformation, the global picture at large? Well, information technology, as you know, can empower an organization to reach any scale. I think this is limitless, right? Our esteemed CIOs in this session will talk about how really disruptive technologies are being tested and applied at scale to transform various aspects and facets on businesses in their respective domain. So let all of us come together and cheer for our accomplished panelists. Allow me to please welcome on the virtual stage Rajesh Nagathan, the CIO India and Southwest Asia Coca-Cola. Warm welcome to you. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist is Ambuj, Bhalla, Director, IT Security, CISO, IndiGo, InterGlobe Aviation Limited. Well, this is to just let you know that he may not be able to join us due to an emergency at his place. However, we will keep you posted if he's able to make it to the panel discussion. And nevertheless, we would go ahead and invite on the stage. Let's also welcome Govind Singh, the Executive Director and Group CIO, Dalmia, Bharat. Well, Govind would be joining us from an audio mode. Warm welcome to you, Govind. And with that, let's also welcome Abhishek Bansal, the Head Non-Financial Risk and Chief Information Security Officer, Max Life Insurance. Welcome, Abhishek. Let's also put our hands together and welcome Rajesh Ramnani, the Director, Synergy India, Dell, Vmware. Well, the contours of this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, will be held together by our moderator, who's diligently taken up his place. Let's welcome Mr. Lalatendu Das, partner, Mckinsey and Company. Well, Mr. Das, if you're all set, we are ready to hand over to you.
Thank you, Shikha, and thanks for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel discussion on the role of cloud in business transformation. I, along with our panel members, are excited to be here. Let me begin by sharing a short story. And Moderna, as a pharmaceutical company, everybody is familiar with them. They're pretty well known for their COVID vaccine, which is quite effective. But what not many people are aware that they run their drug design studio, which is a proprietary software for drug discovery completely on cloud. Using the cloud scalable compute and storage, this software designs mRNA sequences for protein targets. And further, using cloud's data warehouse techniques, scientists integrate results from multiple parallel experiments, which kind of goes on in Moderna, which was earlier impossible to do in real time. So when COVID hit, partly due to this infrastructure and obviously Moderna's institutional knowledge, they were able to deliver the first clinical trial batch of their mRNA vaccine in just 42 days from the initial sequencing of the protein. And just to contrast this, usually this effort takes at least multiple months, if not years. And I'm sure Moderna is just one of the many examples on how business is getting transformed using cloud. So without much further ado, let me begin this discussion and come to you, Vrijesh, with the first question. And if you look at for last few months, Brijesh, obviously in the post-pandemic world, there is a lot of discussions about moving to cloud. Cloud kind of has the mind share of leadership. What is making the shift now, according to you?
Yeah, thanks, Lalatendu. While there have been the traditional drivers, if I may call it that, towards the cloud, which have been to say that You don't have to write lengthy capex proposals. You don't have to put money up front, or cost savings, etc. Those were possibly the drivers. In the post pandemic, or the during the pandemic, the drivers have been that there was a huge acceptance of the rest of the organization towards, I would say, digital working or virtual working, etc. And that was largely enabled by cloud, because most of your virtual working applications were cloud hosted. Second, I would say, in terms of the agility with which you will be able to access any of these and scale any of these, like the modern example that you gave, people really realized that part. And largely what we also see is a lot of the particular digital native kind of propositions which are coming into the business, be it B2B kind of a world, or a B2C kind of a world, or the UPI payments. So these are all cloud native, as in they originated on the cloud. So all of these things are the ones which are enabling first the people, the consumers, as well as organizations at large, to be able to scale up very quickly.
Yeah, and Rajesh, I heard you say, touch upon many of the themes which are very relevant, agility, scale. You talked about customer behavior as well. Just taking the discussion forward, Govind, if I come to you, and you have been quite experienced in core sector with your, stint in Dalmia Cement and all, just help us understand what are the key use cases that organizations are leveraging cloud technologies for.
Yeah, sure. So my views are, some of the areas like ERP, business intelligence, machine learning, predictive analysis. RAS is something which is catching up quite a lot in the manufacturing sector. They are the areas where the cloud technologies could be really, really leveraged to the benefit of the organization. Like, for example, in ERP, when any ERP application which is set up for an organization, if it is done in a hosted environment, typically the entire environment is upscaled for the month end or a year end or a quarter end rush. Whereas if we do the same thing in a cloud environment, it's like a tap. So you switch on the tap and you increase the volume of the outflow there, and you have more number of cores, more memory, and all those kind of things there. And you pay only for that part which you're utilizing. That's a big advantage. In case of business intelligence, like things like predictive analysis, which requires huge compute, but it requires, the periodicity of running a predictive analysis could be only once in a week or once in a fortnight. Now, there is no point of investing your precious money, on account of building that infra for something which will be used only for 1% or 5% of the time there. So if we leverage it from the cloud technologies, which are supported by various cloud service providers there, it helps. Machine learning also is one of the huge business case which is catching up there, in the same lines. A lot of business intelligence reports which are required, which help in the business decision making processes, are generally run once in a while, once in a week or once in a fortnight. Now they also can be done that way. The latest use case which is there in the RAS area, robotics as a service, is there. Now that's something which is very, very great there, which could really help a manufacturing organization to completely transform their production journey or their production process, and all that can also leverage it from from the cloud technologies there. So I think these are some of the cases, in my opinion, which can be utilized.
Yeah, thanks, Govind. I think you touched on a broad set of use cases, and I personally took away RAS for the first time, robotics as a service. I'm pretty sure that's pretty relevant now. One of the things that comes to business leaders and as a decision-making process, which to some extent is a challenge with cloud, is there are multiple options. As Govind just shared, there are multiple use cases, so therefore there are multiple options when it comes to private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud. Then you come to the other end, the way it is delivered. There is software as a service, infrastructure as a service. Now we heard about robotics as a service. There are so many options. Now, let me come to you, Rajesh, given your experience in this space. What are the trends that you are seeing in India when it comes to picking the preferred service model for Indian organizations? And maybe second part of the question is, how should organizations make that design choice given this plethora of options available?
Thanks, LD, and appreciate you having me on this panel. As our esteemed panelists just spoke about, I think to make things simpler, I'll give a real life example. So, if you a few days back, I think Domino's, when they make their pizzas, they have 50 different ingredients that they put in it. They gave it to someone to try to make it at home. Now, of course, the taste that even with those 50 ingredients made at home is very different than what we see and what we eat at normal pizza at Domino's. The reason is because, of course, the processes that they follow and the training that they give, even the machineries that they use, is standardized and uniform across. Similarly, on the cloud as well, as many of our panelists pointed out, you have multiple options. Organizations today are not just going for public cloud or private cloud, they are going for something like a multi cloud, which is private, public, even at the edge. What they want is, of course, while they are putting their workloads across, they don't want to retain their staff to develop application. They want uniformity across these different clouds that we are seeing organizations strive for. So even when it comes to securing their data, that is what they want across different platforms, and that's what we do at VMware. Allow them to put their workloads on any cloud, but at the same time, the platform underneath for managing, supporting, as well as making sure that the experience is the same for their applications, for their end users and their customers, is uniform across. So that is what we are seeing the trend as of now.
Thanks, Rajesh. And it's quite relevant. And if I just change the topic a little bit more towards the business value aspect, given we talked about the technology, the choices, but nothing moves unless you have a business owner with a clear business case. So with that, Ambuj, thanks for joining. I understand you had a personal situation, but let me come to you. If you were to explain the benefits of cloud to a business leader, say your CFO, who understands very little about technology, I'm taking the liberty to make that statement. What attributes and levers would you highlight as benefits of cloud?
So I think, thank you so much for having me on the discussion. So I think it will be more or less the same what the fellow members have spoken about in their respective bits, but I think more so will be on the towards the adoption of cloud. What would I say is that uh, in today's time there is no parameter actually. Backhauling everything into your data center is something that people don't really want to, right? And that's when the need arises. So people are now really wanting open architectures, and for this there is definitely a need for an organization to evolve. So one is that yes, backhauling everything is not possible. Second, a very important thing is that we've spoken about agility and pay as you grow or scale as per the need, right? As per the demand. These systems, I believe that in today's time, if you have your private infrastructure or private data centers or private cloud, right, they may not be able to meet up to their expectations, right? So because they are running with a fixed compute, right? But these systems that are on cloud enabled systems, right? So you pay as you need, and you can augment it at vertical as an or horizontal, as per the need. My perspective to this is that while cloud is going to be there and people will definitely be opting for it, but the perspective is that into these hybrid environments or into these multi-cloud environments, can we just build in homogeneous view, which is very important actually, right? So we should be having a posture that can give me a complete insight, right, from a operation side of it or from the security side of it. That's very important. I think these are on these lines. the business case has to be demonstrated, whether it's to your executive staff or the CFOs, so that they can understand this value.
And thanks, Ambuj. I think you talked about on some very important shifts which cloud brings. You talked about pay-as-you-go model. You talked about how the operations and control needs to be adjusted accordingly. To take this topic a little bit deeper, and Abhishek, since you have experience in financial services or regulated industries, let me ask you this: that in light of making this heavy capex shifting to pay-as-you-go, what changes do you anticipate in organizations, particularly financial control and audit control or security for that matter, to get the best out of the cloud investments?
So first of all, thank you, LD. Thank you, Economic Times. Really privileged to be part of this panel. I think financial control functions, they are gladly accepting this because they are getting more realistic budgets, if I may say, closer cost projections, from the functions, and definitely they can tame, what used to be sunk cost on a lot of certain, initiatives, whether it is, scaling up of the infrastructure on certain matters, or whether it is experimenting, for innovation, where some environment needs to be spawned for that. So that's where I think the financial control functions are paying it up with open arms, because it is not only the direct IT cost which one can see, with respect to, let's say, maybe infrastructure or application. There are a lot of allied costs to it, and I think you touched upon it, and I'll come to it regarding cybersecurity, audit compliance, right? Managed security services. So all of those things, and needless to say, the real estates, and how do you really put in the depreciating effect, on the assets which you procure upfront. So primarily that capex is definitely going to turn out to be, more and more opex, and that's going to be a subtle change. I mean, because we used to see where the financial control functions are more happy to accept one-time capex investments, and they don't really, really invite you to have opex cost. So I think that really is one shift which we see is going to happen. With respect to audit compliance and controls, I think it's going to give a more structured approach around it, provide more agility. So why do I say so is, with cloud, like people are picking up cloud native functionalities for development. The same thing is adopted, rather than actually going into a waterfall model for security audit and compliance. It will become more inline. I mean, what people are talking about, and we have seen the emergence of DevSecOps, right? So it is all going to be in that entire CI/CD pipeline where things are going to happen more and more real time, providing that agility back to the company. So these are the few things which I see would provide. So inline audit compliance and security is going to provide more sharpness to that function, less risk for the company. And definitely on the financial side, we see as a trend that capex, the acceptability, if I may say, of the financial control functions, and more receptivity towards the opex than the capex.
Thanks, Abhishek. Just a call out to the audience: if you have any questions for our esteemed panelist, do pose your question. I will try my best to pick your question and direct to the panel members. But taking the discussion forward, I think so far we talked about what are the trends, what are the business cases and use cases associated with cloud. I think the next logical segue would be to probe a little bit more on how this cloud transmission journey looks like. For that, Govind, if I can come to you, if you are advising somebody, an organization which is pretty early in their cloud adoption journey, what, according to you, would be some of the pitfalls that you would probably advise them to watch out for?
Yeah, this is a great question. In fact, this is where I have personally seen people struggling. So my take or my learnings on this, basically 3 or 4 points I would like to share here. One is, a need to do a very, very proper ROI calculation should be done. Now, what is OPEX versus CAPEX there? Now, how do we calculate CAPEX? How do we calculate OPEX and all that? Sometimes we miss out some of the things and our ROI calculation goes haywire. The second thing is, which is very, very critical, and my fellow panelists here also will agree to me, is on the IT security part. Now, IT security in the cloud environment is a different ball game altogether. So it has to be, so whether you're running a SOC or you're doing it in-house or whatever, but it will be a very different thing there. So it has to be, kept in focus there. And the most critical thing amongst all these three will be probably doing the continuous, analysis of the workload placements there in the environment there. So, how read the fine print there with your service provider. What is their compute cost, storage cost, ETL cost, and all those kind of things. So if we do not follow those practices as per the most optimal commercial benefits to us, we will not be getting. So these are the three things, in my opinion, if we are able to take care of, cloud journey will become much more meaningful and much more beneficial to us. And our CFOs also will be very, very happy.
Thanks, Govind. I think thanks for sharing this. I'm sure many of us would benefit, and all of us have kind of burnt our finger in some point of time in getting some of these wrong. But I think the corollary to this question is, as you talked about, what are the pitfalls? Maybe the corollary would be, what are the critical success factors, therefore? And Rajesh, if you can come in here and just say, what are the success factors that you have seen in addition to the points that Govind touched on?
Sure. So while, like my co-panelists have explained, it's imperative to kind of explain the numbers, get your number working right, etc. Yes, no two ways about it. We need to kind of get that done right. But I would also kind of want to educate people and show the art of possible in terms of opportunity of what can be done to the rest of the business as well, apart from the finance part of it. To say that, can I go to my head of marketing and tell him that, look, by moving all of our, let's say, consumer initiatives to the cloud or getting onto a SaaS application as against an on-prem one, what is it that is possible? What is it that would be, a picture that would be far superior than what if we did, and then enlist more of backers to the cloud journey for the whole organization, rather than just engage with the finance function and try and do only the number bit. So I think to kind of get the education and the awareness right about cloud for the rest of your stakeholders, I think that is very important to make this a very successful journey and not keep it just a IT transformation type of a thing. Second one, in my view, would be to kind of grow and recruit and nurture talent within your own tech teams who would be able to do this transformation, sustain it, build on it. So I think a lot of us feel that, we just get a partner and then we do it. I think in addition to the partner, that kind of soaking in of the entire, I would say, journey has to happen within the talent in-house as well. Then, of course, I would say looking at the particular aspect of being able to experiment and switch on, and more importantly, switch off the functionalities which don't work is most important, because that is when I would say rapid experimentation or experimentation at scale will happen, and you will be able to kind of cast your net much wider. So these, in my view, would be the more sustainable factor to a cloud adoption journey and make it a success.
Yeah. And Rajesh, I heard you talk about rapid experimentation, talent, which we are going to talk a little bit more, in just a few minutes. You also touched upon managing the stakeholders, not making it just an IT project or a business project. And in many of the organizations, one of the key stakeholders is your information security and then the compliance department. These are the key functional departments. Now, one of the challenges with cloud is it is demanding a shift in the way we were looking at information security. If I take this liberty, 10 years or 15 years back, it was a castle and moat approach where you set up a firewall across your perimeter and you think you are done, right? You are ready. Versus now in cloud world, we are talking about newer paradigms, zero trust security, and so on and so forth. So Ambuj, I think you have experience in this space. Let me come to you first. What are the shifts that you are seeing when it comes to information security on cloud vis-a-vis the old way of managing on-premise infrastructure? Ambuj, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was talking earlier. Yeah, what I believe is that, as I was explaining, people have already thought of doing away from backhauling everything into their systems, right? And this requires this definitely is looking up to a shift in the way we've been deploying defense in depth in our environments, right? Now the point is that you may want to pick up an application and deploy, let's say, in a private cloud or a public cloud, or you may want to opt for a SaaS. The essence is, how do you ensure that the layers of security that you think of, whether it's authentication or it's authorization or it's data. I mean, you have to have those signs being taken care of very categorically, and that's what is the ask today. I can't tell my business, okay, you have to operate only in this environment because of so and so factors. Business today is more aware, and in fact, the with digitization, in fact, people are more aware than at times. They're more aware of what's happening in the market space. Actually, the solutions or the commodities, they're far better equipped with that knowledge. So the point here is that you have to carve out what is it that you want. I mean, what if I know what is my crown jewel, then I can obviously instruct my business guys, right? Okay, you want this data to be presented in cloud, so these are the following criteria that are required to be met with, right? So, like, for example, if I'm wanting to invest in a SaaS provider, let's say if it is dealing with the PI or SPI information, and if I know that privacy by design is my need, right? Because this being my crown jewel, and for privacy by design, I need to have XYZ factors, whether it talks about having a homogeneous view, whether it talks about having a zero trust access, whether it talks about having a visibility into the SaaS provided environment, right? Those things can be carved out, at when this system is getting conceptualized. That's how I look at it. I mean, you don't have. I mean, in today's time, I don't think I can have a set layer. Basically, it has to be decided when a project is being conceived, right? You have to think through. You have to define it at all the mechanism that you need when it is being conceptualized, and then you have to actually obviously evolve it to the next level.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think I'm taking away two things. One is you need to have a clear classification of your systems, which is a crown jewel versus, how do you prioritize which are the applications that you do. And second is you're saying, get InfoSec design early in the life cycle as you are conceptualizing projects, rather than making it as afterthought and then struggling.
Absolutely.
Just taking this forward, I think when it comes to regulated industries, panel members in banking, insurance, I think there are some additional consideration that also comes into effect. So Abhishek, you are from that industry, and let me come to you. In these regulated environment, what are the additional consideration to what Ambuj kind of touched upon that organization needs to keep in mind?
So pretty much, if I may say, the controls, are there with respect to, they're pretty much the same on cloud enterprises or the cloud infrastructure as well, with slight changes. Say, for example, few of the regulators talk about that, no, you need to keep your core data or sensitive data on an instance which is hosted in India only. So to that extent, there are certain boundary conditions which are placed to you. They will place to you an overall agenda around resilience, right? So one has to think through that, people talk about that, when they go to cloud, it's an automatic resiliency because they will be into multiple availability zones, right? So one may have to think through, while it is not explicitly mentioned as a prescriptive control, but you may have to extend it based on the understanding the regulators have given overall, because I think regulators are also becoming more and more prescriptive as they are seeing adoption of these technologies. But one can extend that, instead of having multiple availability zones alone, you may also seek multi-region support, right? What we used to do with traditional infrastructure when it comes to availability, you will always have it in a different seismic zone, your disaster recovery environment, something similar to that extent, right? Another key element which is again an extension, because regulators are not stopping you, if I may say, on the usage of any technology, but they expect the set of control structures. So if you say monitoring east-west traffic is going to be a nightmare for me in the cloud, then that's not an answer they'll take it from you. You will have to kind of deploy, let's say, maybe monitoring mechanisms with respect to, let's say, maybe a workload protection program, or maybe, so how do you ensure that if at all there is an incident, you do have the monitoring visibility and you are taking appropriate action? So ignorance is not a bliss. I mean, that's where the carry forward is there. But all in all, I have seen regulators, whether it is IRDAI insurance, or RBI or SEBI, they have all been supportive. They're not saying no for usage of cloud. With few instances that you should have transaction integrity, visibility, and in certain cases that traceability is there with Indian instances only, because if it is on all outside instances, then sometimes you may not get trail back for fraudulent transactions, and or you may have to use some other mechanisms which are little lengthier. So in interest of customer, that's how they have been put forth.
I think this is very promising, the way you outline, and what regulator is asking is, here are the guidelines, and it's up to individual organizations to explain how they are complying. Just to take this point forward, because regulation in the country is now evolving in a much higher metabolic rate, if I may say so, in last 5-6 years. The data privacy norms are getting clarified. There is talk about consent management. Residency has been around for a while. So Rajesh, if I can come to you, right, given this evolving paradigm of regulation, what are the things that you would probably advise leaders to do or keep in mind or design upfront so that they're not surprised down the line in their cloud journey?
Yeah, so very valid point, LD. And as my fellow panelists spoke about, actually, what we've been hearing, there are 3 laws of cloud, like the 3 laws of nature. First is, of course, the physical aspect, as in how much data can be kept on, and compatibility of those applications and workloads on cloud. Second is basically the commercial aspect, as some of us spoke. The ROI piece is really important. We have to take other consideration. And third is the regulation piece, which of course is very, very critical when you are moving your data. So the first part to it is, when you are actually creating applications in your own environment, you take care of all these regulatory requirements, because it is your own environment. You have better control. When you are moving on to the cloud, what is expected is, at the least, is the same kind of security as well as regulatory requirements are carried forward onto the cloud as well. And the control has to be with you. As Ambuj mentioned, the monitoring and the control piece has to be at one single place. So from an OEM perspective, what at VMware we are doing is basically making this journey simplified, irrespective of whether you have you are creating the environment locally or on the cloud. The platform is common across, and the same kind of controls, when you build a program internally, are carried forward when you are putting it on cloud or you are putting it in the edge environment. So that's one thing I think will help customers in future to develop these applications and adopt cloud.
Thank you, and it's very helpful, Rajesh, Abhishek, Ambuj. You gave different perspectives on thinking about security, compliance, and all. I think we touched on the point about talent a little before, a few minutes before, and let me come to that topic, because I believe that's very critical to not just to start but also sustain a transformation. And Govind, if I can come to you, we also heard in this panel that it should not be just an IT-led transformation or a business-led transformation. You need to bring all their stakeholders together. So can you talk a little bit about what are the shifts that you are seeing in the operating model between business and technology when it comes to successful, cloud journeys?
Yeah. Again, a great question, LD. So, this is a paradigm shift from a fixed cost model to a variable cost model. Now, something which was going to cost X amount of money there may become 2X or may become 0.5X also, depending upon the way it was asked for, the way it was negotiated with the service providers, and the way it was operated for. So it's a complete cultural change, both from the business side also and from the IT people also. So like, for example, there is a new requirement to add a database to your, or to add a particular load to your data lake, for example. Now, suddenly, the size of the data is huge. Now, if you're using a very different method to use your ETL, the same cost can go as high as 2 or 3 times. Also, the business should understand. So it is the responsibility of the IT team to make the business team understand the reasons why this cost could be variable, why a cloud model will be a variable cost model. This has to be very, very clearly and transparently explained to the business team also, for us to make sure that, those bills are not getting held up by the finance team and all that. Similarly, every additional cost which is required to be taken out, it should be linked directly to the business benefits which we have. So like, for example, if there is a new database which is required to be added there, why it is required. So once we are able to do that part in a more business friendly or business centric manner, I think that will help. Right now, in a on-premise model, all these things are not required. So what best or what worst can happen is the performance of the system may become faster or slower, but the cost will still remain the constant generally. So I think that's a paradigm shift which we have to make there, both from the business side and also from the IT side.
The shift indeed, and a shift that not many people plan on day one. And what I'm taking away is, Govind, is for us to be successful, this needs to be designed right up front in our journey. And so far, audience, I think we have been talking about facts and figures. So let me get creative a little bit and go to a hypothetical realm. So let me come to you, Rajesh. And the hypothetical question to you is, if you had a crystal ball to gaze into the future, what are the top 2 or 3 innovations in cloud technologies do you anticipate in the next 5 years?
Oh, yeah, so basically, just to answer that question, for my real world experience, pre-pandemic, I had a chance to visit Germany to see some of the innovations that are taking place. And there was, in fact, a container which you keep in the normal household kitchen. Now, this container was not just a normal container. As soon as the level of that container went below a certain level, an automatic trigger went to the nearby Amazon store or some store for that particular element in that container to be refreshed. So maybe some oil or some. So if you see that cloud is now going public, private, edge, in our own households, with so many of the things being automated, you won't be surprised that in the future we will have our own mini cloud in every single household. Now, that is what we are foreseeing, because even now, if you see pictures and other videos and other things that you do at home, is in fact a lot of data. So I foresee cloud to be everywhere in the near future, and there will be a need to for such services to be provided on-prem at home or in public cloud. Secondly, I see, as many of our colleagues also mentioned, artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, these to be gaining ground. And you will see a lot of these will be on cloud. And third major thing, I think, with all the user data being on the cloud, of utmost importance will become security of that data, because unless and until you don't secure that data, cloud has no meaning, because any Tom, Dick and Harry can have access to your information. So these 3 things I think will actually change the future. You'll see a lot of developments around these.
Very relevant. And just to conclude this discussion, maybe Vrijesh, I'll come to you for a quick 30-second answer. Given these shifts in innovation, what industries do you anticipate getting disrupted the most in cloud? If you can just give your top 3 names of the industry.
Yeah, Lalatendu, I'll answer it a little bit differently. That there is no industry that will not get disrupted, or I would say that will whose lives will not be touched by cloud. But the way in which it will happen is to say that there will be periphery of the business transactions which will see the adoption first, moving in towards the core or the more regulated aspects of it, but eventually everything will get engulfed. And if I may draw a quick parallel to it, it is like the fixed line telephony versus cellular adoption. So you just don't have any fixed line which is actually being used. You might have a phone, but actually being used very little. So somewhere I see the journey like that. Nothing will be left untouched.
Very well put. Very well put. Now, thank you, panel members. I think we are at the end of our allotted time. And if I just recap, I think we started talking about what are the trends, use cases. We also touched upon the business cases, which is very important to get a program off the ground. We also talked about adoption journeys, and thanks for sharing some of the pitfalls and learnings along the way. We covered information security, compliance, talent, and operating model. And towards the end, some future gazing on what the future holds for us. So audience, I hope you find the discussion useful. And this is just a tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there would be other questions. Feel free to reach out to any of us, be the panel members or me on this, and we'll be happy to engage you further on this topic. So on behalf of the panel member, I thank you all for your time. Shikha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Das and the panel for the perspectives. Mr. Bhalla too joined us timely, so genuinely appreciate that bit. And thank you to you, Govind, for sparing your time and spending it with us. Rajesh, Abhishek, Rajesh, thank you also very much. And with the discussions that just unfolded from your end, I think we do realize how, and we even do realize more emphatically, I should say, how cloud can really transform the customer experience, and actually power innovation and drive data-based decision-making, most importantly. Outdated IT infrastructures and applications often can stand in the way, we know, but I think there is no worry for now, as you now know, basis the discussion from our panelists, how to stay in the first lane always. So thank you once again to the entire panel. And on that note, it's time to say a quick and a nice thank you to our lovely array of partners. Thank you so much to our presenting partner, Dell Technologies, our co-powered by partner, Amazon Internet Services Private Limited, our cybersecurity partner, Cloudflare, our gold partners being Hitachi Vantara, Commvault, Software One, and Vmware. Our silver partners being Snowflake, Redington India, and IBM partner. Our associate partners being Samsung Data Systems, Lenovo, and Intel. Our media partners, Silicon India, CIO, Review India. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a chat is getting brewed. It's just simmering and would be on the screens right in a bit. For now, can I request all of you to once again just engage in everything that's laid out on the platform in terms of you downloading your digital certificates for your participation, in terms of exchanging views, doing the networking there outright in the networking lounge. Please visit the experience zone and everything else that must and should ramp up your leaderboard scores for making sure that those gifts and those exciting prizes do reach to you. So keep participating, keep being with us. We'll be right back on the screens. See you.